Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal. Greg Anthony here on this January 31st, 2017 day on our calendar. Today, my main subject will be the big, beautiful wall that President Trump wants to build on the southern border, as well as having Mexico pay for it. The purpose being twofold, he says, to put a tighter clamp on those who come into our country, and also to stop the drugs pouring into our country. I want to relate that to Operation Gladio and who's really behind the drug cartels, and we'll do that later. But first, my Jesuit quote of the day and my commentary comes from President Abraham Lincoln, and I think you'll find this very long quote quite interesting. It is with Southern leaders of the Civil War as with big and small wheels of our railroad cars. Those who ignore the laws of mechanics are apt to think that the large, strong, and noisy wheels they see are the motive power, but they are mistaken. The real motive power is not seen. It is noiseless and well concealed in the dark, behind its iron walls. The motive power are the few well-concealed pails of water heated into steam, which is itself directed by the noiseless, small but unerring engineer's finger. The common people see and hear the big noisy wheels of the Southern Confederacy's cars. They call Jeff Davis, Toombs, Beauregard, and others the leaders. And they honestly think that they are the motive power, the first cause of our troubles. But this is a mistake. The true motive power is secreted behind the thick walls of the Vatican, the colleges and schools of the Jesuits, the convents of the nuns, and the confessional boxes of Rome. There is a fact which is too much ignored by the American people and with which I am acquainted only since I became president. It is that the leading families of the South have received their education in great part, if not in whole, from the Jesuits and the nuns, hence those degrading principles of slavery, pride, cruelty, which are as a second nature among so many of those people. Hence that strange want of fair play, humanity, that implacable hatred against the ideas of equality and liberty as we find them in the gospel of Christ. You do not ignore that the first settlers of Louisiana, Florida, New Mexico, Texas, Southern California, and Missouri were Roman Catholics, and that their first teachers were Jesuits. It is true that those states have been conquered or bought by us since, but Rome had put the deadly virus of her antisocial and anti-Christian maxims into the veins of the people before they became American citizens. Unfortunately, the Jesuits and the nuns have in great part remained the teachers of these people. They have continued in a silent but most effective way to spread their hatred against our institutions, our laws, our schools, our rights, and our liberties in such a way that this terrible conflict became unavoidable between the North and the South. As I told you before, it is the the papacy that we owe this terrible civil war. You know, I would have laughed at the man who would have told me that before I became the president. But Professor Morse, Samuel Morse, the man who invented the telegraph and who also warned extensively about Jesuit infiltration and its undermining American culture, has opened my eyes on that subject. And now I see that the mystery, also known as Mystery Babylon of Great Revelation 17:5, I understand that engineering of hell, which though not seen or even suspected by the country, is putting into motion the large, heavy, and noisy wheels of the state cars of the Southern Confederacy. Our people are not yet ready to learn and believe those things, and perhaps it is not the proper time to initiate them to those dark mysteries of hell. It would throw oil on a fire which is already sufficiently destructive. You are almost the only one, and I may add he's speaking to one of his confidants, with whom I speak freely on that subject. But sooner or later the nation will know the real origins of those rivers of blood and tears, which are spreading desolation and death everywhere. And then those who have caused those desolations and disasters will be called to give an account of them. I do not pretend to be a prophet, but though not a prophet, I see a very dark cloud on our horizon, and that dark cloud is coming from Rome. Now, many people say that this doesn't exist anymore. The Vatican has changed its tune. The Jesuits are the great educators. They're only looking out for the good of America and the world. But my question to you is, facts tell us this isn't the case. Every war since the Civil War they can be found involved in, if you look deep enough, if you take the time to get past revisionist history and the mainstream media, who want to level accusations that shows like this are only conspiracy theories. They're false news, fake news. But let me tell you something. Look into your own heart. Do your own research and make up your own mind. Because I've said a long time ago, the facts show that what Lincoln was saying there was absolutely true, and it's continued ever since in the creation and the orchestration of World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, and now, well, we missed the Cold War, as well as the War on Terror. And we've tried to show you facts on this show that prove that. So I'm going to leave it up to you to do some research and to find out where your heart lies on this question. And I believe that what's going on now in our country is a perfect example. The mainstream media covers up the truth. We play the Hegelian dialectic where now the right wing is in power. Before it was the left wing. The people on the left felt very comfortable. Now the people on the right are feeling more comfortable. Obama comes in, destroys many, many things, and now Trump comes in to rebuild it. And in the end, what's really going on? What's really going on is the destruction, eventual destruction of your own country. Slowly, by 1,000 cuts, the Jesuits, if not checked, and if not understood and outed, will come sooner rather than later. So I ask you, question everything. For example, the books that have been written about Abraham Lincoln on the mainstream. Leave this huge story out for a reason, because they realize that if this is known, it's going to be a lot harder to take over and control, to form a one-world government and one-world religion. So you have the History Channel and all of these shows and all of these books leaving out this story that Lincoln was just telling us. Now, I interviewed years ago a man by the name of C.T. Wilcox. Many, many hours and many interviews. And I think he's wrote the most definitive book and doesn't pull any punches about the Vatican's and the Jesuit plot and successful assassination of Lincoln, not by just a lone gunman, but by a number of people, including John Surratt and his band, and showed that much has been left out. of history. This book had documented facts that Lincoln was assassinated by the Jesuits. They could, of course, be disputed. But if they're not brought into the mainstream, into our history books, then how are people going to ever understand it? They won't. Now, C.T. tried to get this book into the mainstream. He didn't. He had a publisher. It took a long time, but he found a fringe publisher to get it done. You can still go to his website if you Google him and read it. He tried to make a movie out of it. And you know how far that would go. It never went anywhere. But there were other movies, that the History Channel, and you'll find so many stories about Lincoln, but they never talk about the real truth behind what he was saying, even in the quote I gave you. Now, during the inaugural of President Trump, the night before the inauguration, he had a big concert, and he did it in a really nice manner, right in front of the Lincoln Memorial. And it was a beautiful sight. And in fact, he brought in musicians and people that were more, they weren't the A-list Hollywood people who basically said, I don't want to be involved with this man, but who cares? He brought in a number of people from, just regular Americans to perform. And I thought that was a good thing. But the one thing I looked at when I saw Lincoln in the background, my goodness, he said, when will the American people be ready to realize where the rivers of blood come from? Apparently, folks, they're not ready now. And will they ever be ready? Because since Lincoln and the Civil War, just think about all the wars and all the killings and what's going on in the world today and the future people that are going to be in these rivers of blood without understanding who really is causing it, like Lincoln said. That was my big regret. And so we push on this show, and even though the mainstream media and anyone that confronts it will immediately shut it off and say, oh, that's conspiracy theory. That is fake news. And they do. My only point is to them, look in the mirror and really see what you're saying, because you know what? There's a lot of fake news coming out of all of those channels, CNN, Fox, you name it. And the American people still are not ready to accept it. And that's my big regret. So I'll leave this commentary and this quote by Lincoln and move on to the subject I want to spend some time on, and that is the Great Wall that Mr. Trump wants to build, as well as connecting it to Operation Gladio, which people, I don't even think they're ready to understand this subject, and that is who really controls the drug trade in this country and for what purpose. Okay, before I get to Operation Gladio and the wall that Trump wants to build, let me mention this, that Obama's immigration policies were basically open borders, very lax in enforcement of the laws of our country, and thousands and thousands of people flowed in here basically as if America had no borders. Now, every country has immigration laws. Ours are basically, you probably don't realize this, but Mexico's laws, and I live on the Mexican border, I understand them, and if you read them and go to Mexican immigration laws, they're much tougher than ours. Now, if you enforce, you can have the toughest laws on the books, but if you don't enforce them, what good are they? And that's probably what was happening in the Obama. Now, it's what was happening in the Obama administration. Now, Trump is coming in and basically saying, I want to enforce our laws. And if you look at the laws and you put them side by side with Mexico's, ours are more inviting than the laws on the books in Mexico. So that argument doesn't hold water if the Mexican government is stating that this wall will disrupt things. No, it's not going to disrupt things. What it will do is create a sense of safety for the right wing in this country. And for the left wing, it will create this idea that America is no longer America. No walls, we need bridges. That's what's happening. So you're seeing the Hegelian dialectic work here. So, in fact, if you go to Mexico, and I go back and forth because I live 7 miles from the border, and when I'm in Mexico, and let's say I drive 2.5 hours to Ensenada or something, none of this has any bearing between the people who are living there. The American people and the Mexican people basically get along quite well. And I'll be the first one to admit that there's many American businesses there. There are many expatriate, especially elderly people, who choose to live in Mexico because it is cheaper. Do you realize that many people cross the border to get dental care? And they're getting extremely good dental care right in Tijuana, much cheaper than they can do it here in the States. And I, in fact, know an American dentist who works in Mexico. You can go there and do a number of different things. Many people go there and take advantage, Americans, of the fair exchange between two countries. So this wall will not change that kind of feeling between the American people and the Mexican people. It will create, I believe, a false sense of security for people in this country. Now, let's put it this way. The wall could help the Border Patrol enforce the laws of our country, which I doubt if Mexico really looks at it, the Mexican people look at it, is a bad thing. So this illegal immigration of people coming here and running across the border, then getting low-paying jobs on some farm, probably there's going to be a change in that. And I think it's the Mexican people that are legally here support Trump, many of them, because they don't want to see their jobs taken away. Now, the point is, I think what we have to do is create an environment where the people in Mexico live a little better. So, many of them, I have Mexican friends that go back and forth. They work here. I know some that work at a marina. I've known them for years. And they live in Tijuana. And they're great people. They have legal visas. They have legal green card work permits. And they drive every day from Tijuana to San Diego and work. And then, do you realize that probably the biggest source of income in Mexico, it's either one or two, is the money that people who are Mexican citizens bring back to Mexico from the United States. So I think we have to keep this relationship up. The people of Mexico and the people of America are not going to go to war with each other. Now, what is the purpose of this wall? Besides enforcing our laws and making a point that, yes, we want you here, but let's do it legally. Nothing wrong with that. Mexico's laws are much tougher. And the problem that we're seeing here, and I'm looking at it from a very practical sense, is not so much the illegal people from Mexico coming over. There's more people coming from South America and Middle Eastern and other countries that are using Mexico as a way to get through. And so I have to get back to the old saying. America, yes, is a country of immigrants, but it's a country of legal immigrants. You got to stand in line just like everybody else did. We're not closing our doors, but this is not going to play out in the media, because the media, controlled by the Jesuits, wants to create chaos. And you're seeing it with these SAG actors getting up and saying, this is a draconian wall, this is not America. It's not. So if Trump wants to build a wall and make people on the right feel better, he has the power to do that. Now, one of the main reasons he's talking about building this wall is to stop the drug cartels from bringing drugs into this country. And he pointed out in his campaign, so many people, young people, old people, are dying from drug overdoses in cities and countries, especially in the inner cities. And much of it's coming from the southern border. Now, here's my point. And this leads into Operation Gladio. The real controllers of the drug trade, and why this will not succeed. Because if your CIA, if the mafia, if the drug cartels, and the Jesuits and the Vatican are all working together to bring drugs into this country, making a fortune to fund all their covert wars, you can build a wall 20 million feet high, and it's not going to stop. And as far as legal immigration, look, do you realize, and I follow it closely here, every now and then you'll see a boat floating or put into one of the marinas here, and they come all the time, and they'll abandon the boat, and then you'll see ICE, or you'll see the Border Patrol come and put a little sticker on it, and it's a drug boat. They've even built submarines to bring drugs and people into the States. So this is a huge problem. And the point is, you can build the highest wall. And if your government, and if the CIA and everybody's involved in bringing the drugs, the big drug lords and these people will always bring it in. You may get a few more little guys getting caught to make people feel like there's something being done. But until publicly people understand Operation Gladio, its historical beginnings, why it began, why it's still going on today, and how they're using millions and millions of dollars of drug money to fund their covert operations, now to fund ISIS. They've done it all through the period of time since World War II. And that was the beginnings of figuring out that if they could sell drugs to the common man, they could use that money to fund covert wars, and they did, in fact, do that ever since World War II, and it's no secret the drug culture of the 60s was a product of, yes, your government, and Operation Gladio. So in the second half hour, I'm going to succinctly explain what it is, so that you understand. I believe that they're building the wall now to make people feel safer. And I think the drug trade will never end unless we understand where it comes from. And I think you're going to understand that Operation Gladio is an undisputed historical fact, overlooked by the mainstream media, your government officials. They don't want you to know this. Now, I've given, presidents a pass on certain things, but you can't give them a pass on this information. They know about it. They realize it. In fact, Bill Clinton, remember Mena, Arkansas? How much more do people have to know? These people, Clinton, in fact, was caught red-handed of profiting from drugs and being connected with it, and other presidents as well. So, in the second half hour, we'll deal with Operation Gladio, the big wall, and other things on the Investigative Journal. Back in 3 minutes, yes, with more on the Investigative Journal. So no flipping, no going away. Come back. We'll see you in 3 minutes.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal, and before we get back to the big, great, beautiful wall and Operation Gladio, how that relates, one last word on the immigration order that Trump, the executive order he put into play, that's caused everybody on the left and the right to, fight tooth and nail over. And let me mention this, and I did a show on it yesterday, so go to my show yesterday, and you'll get a good look at how I feel about it. But the point is, you're going to hear a lot of people now on the left. There's going to be lawsuits that it's unconstitutional, etc., etc., exactly what he did. And now I've read the order. And let me just say this. Nothing, you can scream and scream and scream, but there's nothing unconstitutional in what he did. They're going to say it discriminates against religion, which they would have a point, but it actually didn't discriminate against religion. Discriminated against countries that present danger to this country. And just so happens that radical Islam has raised its ugly head. And that's the method of choice that the Jesuits and people who are orchestrating this war have chosen. So you can just rest assured that what he did was not unconstitutional. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Okay, so we're talking about the beautiful wall. And will this stop drugs? Let's look at the history of why drugs first came into this country in droves during the 60s. If you look prior to that, there wasn't a huge drug problem in this country like we see today. Now, I think that's related to Operation Gladio, and it has its roots, believe it or not, in China. Now, why do I say China? I've talked about this in depth in the past, but let me just give you an overview. After World War II, Pope Pius XII and the heads of the OSS, which were in Rome at the time, Wild Bill Donovan being one of the people there, controlling the OSS, which morphed into the Vatican CIA. And they were looking for a way now to basically fund the next war they were manipulating, and that was between communism and the West. So they looked to China and what was going on between Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. And basically, this rebel group in China needed to be stopped. And so the leader of China decided to raise money covertly, but through the drug trade. And so they began to protect and build and to cultivate poppy fields and heroin and sell it to their own people, using that money to fund the opposition to the warring factions in China. So guess what? They thought, Pope Pius XII and the OSS leaders at the time, hey, this would be a good way to do it. Where can we do it? So they found a place in Burma to do the same thing that the Chinese were doing. And they raised millions and millions of dollars, and the drug trade was off and running. They had to figure out a place to launder the money because you couldn't go through the Office of Budget and Management here. So they used the Vatican Bank as the money laundering operation. That's proven. And so, to make a long story short, you can go back to my other shows and get all the technical things from those years and how they did it, and how that switched from Burma to Afghanistan now because of a drought in Burma. It's going on to this day. And people have talked about Operation Gladio B, but we'll get back to Operation A. So let me give you some history on this. So I don't want to be leveled as someone bringing fake news to you. Operation Gladio, folks, is an undisputed historical fact. Gladio was a part of a post-World War II program set up by the CIA and other NATO officials, supposedly, and I add the Vatican, to thwart future Soviet communist invasions or influence in Italy and Western Europe. Started there. In fact, it became a state-sponsored right-wing terrorist network, funded by this money, by the West, by this idea, involved in false flag operations and the subversion of democracy. The existence of Gladio was confirmed and admitted by the Italian government in 1990. Although I knew about it, folks, long before that. I lived there during the 80s. And like I said on my show yesterday, was almost a victim of one of their terror plots when they blew up the American newspaper, and me and this Italian guy were the only ones in the building. And I was about 10 seconds away from getting blown away. That's how I started researching this. So in 1990, after a judge, Felice Casson, discovered the network in the course of his investigations into right-wing terrorism, Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti admitted Gladio's existence but tried to minimize its significance. The main function of the Gladio-style groups, in the absence of Soviet invasion, seems to have been to discredit left-wing groups and politicians through the use of the strategy of tension, including false flag terrorism. That's what they're doing today. The strategy of tension is a concept for control and manipulation of public opinion through the use of fear, propaganda, agent provocateurs, terrorism. Well, what are they doing today, folks? The aim was to instill fear into the populace while framing communist and left-wing political opponents for terrorist atrocities. So if you just think about how they've progressed, now it's radical Islam in the West, doing the same thing when they were framing communist and left-wing political opponents. Excuse me. Gladio and its stay-behind networks may be one of the most historically accepted and confirmed examples of false flag terrorism. The documentation, the resolutions, confessions, and convictions all confirm that Gladio is much more than the media or government would have you believe, a mere conspiracy theory. See the State Department's special site dedicated to dismissing conspiracy theories, including trying to dismiss Operation Gladio. Won't work, fellas. Now, I believe that people in the truth movement should take advantage of Gladio and the stay-behind networks as a confirmed precedent of the U.S. and Western governments participating in ruthless terror attacks, including the ones going on today all over the world, in Brussels, in France, in San Bernardino, etc., etc. Use Gladio as an example of not fiction but fact. People that don't believe that such things occur in this war on terror right now should be forcefully made aware of such examples, and I'm going to give you some right now. Not to mention the example I gave you yesterday of when a right-wing group came in, anti-imperialistic American group, 10 days before Reagan came to Rome, and I was in the building in Rome working as an editor for the American newspaper when they blew that building up. I was one of them, and I was there. I saw it happen, and I followed the trail, and they created that group. Now, there's another one that you probably want to forget about if you don't believe your government is involved in bringing drugs across the border and using that money to support the Western terrorist group, or the terrorist groups now going on in ISIS. The August 2nd, 1980 bombing of the Bologna train station, which killed 85 people, is widely recognized as a Gladio operation. While it was initially blamed on the communist Red Brigades, eventually right-wing and fascist elements were discovered to be the culprits. 2 Italian Secret Service agents and Licio Gelli, who I referred to yesterday, the head of the infamous P2 Masonic Lodge, were convicted in connection to the bombing. What more do you need? I gave you a complete background on Gelli yesterday and in many other shows. Now, the makings of the bomb came from an arsenal used by Gladio, according to a parliamentary commission on terrorism. The suggested link with the Bologna massacre is potentially the most serious of all the accusations leveled against Gladio, and comes just 2 days after the Italian Prime Minister back then, Andreotti, cleared Gladio's name in a speech to Parliament. He was covering for them. He was controlled by the CIA and all of their operatives that were there in Rome. I was there during that time. Saying that the secret army did not drift from its former NATO military brief. Now, I used to drive through Italy all the time during those times, and I would be stopped all the time. Well, there were always roadblocks, and once you give them your American passport, you're free to go. Very quick when I was there. Now, but I'm familiar with this strategy of tension. Now, let's go back to 1969. In Italy, the Piazza Fontana massacre in Milan killed 16 and injured and maims 80. During a trial of right-wing extremist, General Maletti, former head of the Italian counterintelligence, alleges that the massacre had been carried out by the Italian stay-behind army, right-wing terrorists on the orders of the U.S. Secret Service, CIA, in order to discredit Italian communists. So there's a hidden hand behind these terrorist groups, including ISIS. Who's the hidden hand? The same one that started Gladio right after World War II. How about in Belgium in 1985? A secret army attacks and shoots shoppers in the supermarkets randomly in the county of Brabant, I believe, killing 28 and leaving many wounded. Investigations linked the terror to a conspiracy among the Belgian Stay Behind group, the Belgian Gendarme Bla, SDRAG, the Belgian right-wing group, and the Pentagon Secret Service, DIA. They're involved in these things, and they're doing the same thing today. According to Vincenzo Viceguerra, a far-right terrorist linked to Gladio and currently serving a life sentence for a car bomb murder of 3 policemen, said this: "The reason was quite simple. They were supposed to force these people, the Italian public, to turn to the state to ask for greater security." Now, what are they doing today, folks? They create these terrorist groups. They create terror, and they want you to go to the American government for security. Build the wall. Keep us safe. And this man who worked for them back then, worked for Gladio, this is the political logic that lies behind all the massacres and the bombings which remain unpunished, because the state cannot convict itself or declare itself responsible for what they did. Viceguerra also made this statement to the Guardian newspaper, quote, "The terrorist line was followed by camouflaged people belonging to the security apparatus, or those linked to the state apparatus through rapport and collaboration. I say that every single outrage that followed from 1969 fitted into a single organized matrix." Sounds interesting, doesn't it? He said that all of these groups, the main right-wing terrorist groups active during the 70s, Ordine Nuovo, Avanguardia Nazionale, were being mobilized into the battle as part of an anti-communist strategy originated not with organizations deviant from the institution of power, but from within the state and power itself, and specifically from within the ambit of state relations within the Atlantic Alliance. In 1990, the European Parliament passed a resolution condemning Gladio, so they admitted it exists. The resolution requested full investigations and a total dismantlement of the parliamentary structures involved, neither of which to this day have come to pass. Similar Gladio-like operations have been discovered across Europe, France, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, Germany, Switzerland, and you can go on and on. With this involvement that started, like I mentioned, back when? Back right after World War II. They're using the same strategy of tension today with ISIS. And you can bet your bottom dollar on that. Okay, in the last 9 minutes, I need to comment on a book that was written a couple years ago. It's called Operation Gladio, The Unholy Alliance Between the Vatican, the CIA, and the Mafia, written by Paul Williams. And it's a controversial book, of course, to the mainstream, and difficult to reject, though, a lot of the evidence he brings out. Now, who is this guy, Paul Williams? He's a journalist, author. He's written a number of things: The Vatican Exposed, Crescent Moon Rising, The Day of Islam, Osama's Revenge, The Al-Qaeda Connection. He's written articles for the Wall Street Journal, USA Today. I wonder if he still does. The Counterterrorist, Newsmax, National Review. He's a winner of several Keystone Press Awards, etc. And he also served as a consultant for the FBI, as an adjunct professor for humanities at the University of Scranton and Wilkes University. All right, so let's just take his information as he gives it in his book and make up your own mind who this guy is. Now, he does say that, so I'll give you a quick review. The story started, like he said, as I said, early as 1942. Now, the Vatican Bank was formed then. So that's an interesting thing, the biggest money laundering operation in the world. Still going on today, even though Pope Francis says that they're doing an investigation. It's always doing an investigation into the illegalities. We had John Levy on a week ago. Go back to my show, John Levy. He'll tell you what the Vatican is all about and the banking system still to this day. Through lawsuits he's filed, some have made it all the way to the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco. But the same year, the Office of Naval Intelligence recruited Lucky Luciano as a preeminent drug lord. So they're using the mafia even back then. Now, we look back and we see that the Swiss director of the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, OSS, Alan Dulles at the time, came to the conclusion we're fighting the wrong enemy. Now, Alan Dulles has one of his relatives is also a very high-level bishop at Fordham University. So anyway, Jesuit connection, of course. You'll always find one. Now, let's look back at this. There's a lot of names, a lot of things, but consequently, they got Lucky Luciano released from jail, allowed him to build his narcotic empire, and simply watched the flow of drugs into a largely black ghettos in New York and Washington, the beginning of that. Okay, and now we're looking at the unholy alliance of the American spies, criminals, the Vatican, replicated everywhere from Laos, remember Burma I mentioned, to Marseille, to Panama. And even after Nixon became president in 1969, the strategy of tension was gaining more impetus. Kissinger involved issued orders to Licho Gelli, remember him, to carry out terror attacks. CIA agent Gelli, while I was there, and the coup of using all of this drug money, the way to finance this, and then, of course, using the Vatican, who took 10%, to money launder it. The United States and the Vatican channeled millions of dollars, billions for these operations. Most of the money was raised in questionable ways, and we've talked about that as far as how Gladio raised money through the sale of drugs, all of these people working together. That's why the wall is just going to be a symbol that making America think they're safer. If they think they're going to stop drugs, they got to get to the bottom of this problem, which doesn't seem to make the front page news, does it? Now, I remember they were talking, again, the first major attack of the Banco Nazionale di Agricoltura building in Milan, where over, 17 people died in an explosion. According to official figures, since January 1, 1969, up until 1987, not to mention all of what's going on since then now, there were over 14,591 acts of violence with a political motivation that took place. In these terror attacks, over 500 people died and over 1,200 were injured. A large number of these terror attacks took place in other European countries from 65 to 81. So there's a history of how they do this, folks. Nothing new of what's going on today. It's just that it's grown worldwide. ISIS is their enemy, the enemy of the West, and that's what they're doing here now. It's a worldwide strategy of tension. Before it was localized to different countries. And after a series of assassination attempts to kill President de Gaulle, he denounced, quote, the secret warfare of the Pentagon and expelled the European headquarters from NATO. We forget about all these things, don't we? And in Latin America, according to Williams, he did some research on this. In his book, the CIA and the Vatican launched Operation Condor as the Latin American version of Operation Gladio. The label was applied very liberally by the U.S. intelligence agencies. And the CIA and the Vatican started Operation Condor in the 70s when Opus Dei elicited support from Chilean bishops for the overthrow of the government of President Allende. So you see, this is going on all over the world. It's gone on for years. The Catholic group, this group, was closely working with the CIA-funded organizations such as Fatherland and Liberty, which was later turned into the dreaded Chilean secret police. In 1971, the CIA began shelling out millions to Chilean Institute for General Studies, the Opus Dei think tank for the planning of the revolution. Many members of IGS joined the government after the coup. So if you fast forward to today, they're doing the same thing with supposed moderate Muslim groups. The Vatican involved deeply in all of this stuff, promoting illegal immigration, promoting this all over the world in Europe. Look what's happened there. They've been doing this for a long time. And Williams in his book shows the Vatican was fully involved in Operation Condor, in Operation Gladio, and the Pope was fully behind the purging of left-wing clerics. Leaders of the military junta were devout Catholics. And the Vatican did not abandon General Pinochet, even when he was arrested in Britain for the murder of thousands of Chileans. Back then, Williams points out, Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Angelo Sodano wrote the British government on behalf of the Pope to demand his release. Under Pinochet, hundreds of thousands of Chileans had disappeared. Now, why is the Vatican supporting that? And then we call them our friend here? Something's up in Denmark, right? Under Pinochet, hundreds of thousands of Chileans had disappeared, and more than 4,000 had died. More than 50,000 Chileans were tortured in the name of the Catholic God. CIA's dirty war was perpetrated in many Latin American countries with the help and blessing of the Vatican. And I may add, look at the dirty war in Argentina, and who's the Pope today? Bergoglio, who supported all the killing there. Williams quotes, and I've done a couple stories about Sybil Edmonds, and he quotes this whistleblower, and I presented her story, and we'll do it again. She says, between 1996 and 2002, now listen to this, got to check the time. Between 2002, I got very little time here, so I got 30 seconds. We, the United States, plan, finance, and help execute every major terrorist incident in the Chechen rebels against Russia. All right, I'd love to go on, but I'm running out of time, so we'll continue this. And I think you can see the pattern here. And so when I say that ISIS is being used just the way they've done this in the past, I don't think I'm exaggerating. And do some checking on your own, though, and we'll be back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal. So look forward to talking to you, and see you tomorrow.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.